Dr. Cook, is this new? What is this?
It is new. It's a painting I commissioned. It's done by Z, who has been a professor here since 1996. And Z has, I think, an understanding of what it means to do psychology. So I asked him to join us in a psychology meeting, and he raised questions. He just raised one question, and that is, what is psychology? And we gave many answers to that question. You will find in here neurons. You will find in here the idea of dynamic development. You will find in here the idea of relationships, that people participate together, each bringing their own sense of who they are. So yes, it is new. It just showed up here a couple of weeks ago.
That's wonderful. I think one of the things that I love about the painting is all of the colors and the activity going on between everything in it, and how on the different sides there's so much just bursting forth. I think it's wonderful to study as you're walking by. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you. I'm glad.
What's the space in the middle for?
The space in the middle is meant to be full of light. And maybe that's the mystery. Maybe that's where, in relationships, the creative part happens. Or maybe that's God, God's presence in among us when we least expect it. So the color is meant to bring energy and excitement. Z titled this piece, The Source. And he meant by that, the source of us as psychological beings, our minds, our bodies, our souls. But he also meant it to allude to God, that God brings love and life and truth, and in moments we least expect it. I'm glad you like it.
It's a good addition to the psych department.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing it in the future.
I love being here in your house.
Well, it is always great to have you here.
This is gorgeous and calming. I just love it. But I want us to think a little bit about when I contacted
Yes.
you,
2018?
2018,
That's right.
2 years ago,
That's right.
to ask you to do a commission here that would be from me, but also from the psych department,
Yes.
and also be awarded. And I want to know why you said yes.
Well, the first thing is, I just assume you don't say no to Kaye Cook. That's the first thing, It's just, there's no. But it was, I honestly, Kaye, I just felt so honored that you asked me to do this, and that you were also very open, to something that was more experimental, more abstract, in nature. And then I remember our first meeting. We have Susan and Bert and Neil over here, and we all met together, and I just started jotting some notes. And I remember, like, one of the first things that all of you were talking about, it has to have life. It has to be dynamic. It's got to be something that, movement was something that I remember was key, to this. And so the movement of the mind, the body, the spirit. And so, I was just jotting notes frantically. And
I remember you asked us a question, and I don't know that I have the exact question, but it was something like, what is psychology? You just sort of threw it open,
yeah,
and we all jumped in.
yeah.
So what are some things we talked about?
Oh boy.
I
can't remember which we studied.
I remember. So this is going to be some of my good thing. Yeah. I remember Susan talking about the brain
Yes.
and neurons.
Yes.
No surprise.
And I remember,
I said no surprise.
no surprise, and language.
Yeah.
And I remember Bert talking about where, in a relationship, where does
Yeah.
the relationship reside?
Yeah.
Where does the language reside?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not in either one of the people separately.
Right.
It's in the
Context.
space between them.
That's right.
And I remember I talked developmentally about that there needs to be transformation and change and dynamism and
Mm-hmm.
lots of ideas.
And it was that that dialogue, that coming together, that that place of conversation. And so many times, and I think it's just the nature of who we are as teachers, as to try to give definition to something, we compartmentalize. It belongs to this category, and that's the category of the spirit, and that's the category of the mind, and that's the category of emotion, and we kind of like put them in these blocks. But by doing that, we make something more static, right, in that nature. So it was just, where is the melding together, and that's part of the reason why there's all these different overlaps that are going on in the piece. These kinds of circular movements, and then this one orienting place in the middle. And that was one of the things I took away from what you were talking about, that thing that transforms, kind of a place of light. That kind of emanates from from the center, and then also draws back in towards the center. So for me, it's kind of a place of for me, it's like a kind of a visual breathing, that's occurring in those. And then in the piece, I don't know if it's like, when you look at it, there are these, all these kind of like tiny dots and circles, which are kind of like neural synapses, thinking in those terms. And then there are these rectangles and squares that appear in these different places. And for me, they're a little bit, they're like places of memory. They're places that kind of solidify. They're places that have boundaries to them in the midst of all the dynamism that's going on. So that was something else I was thinking about. And I remember I brought in some sketches, for everyone to look at, and several different color samples, and everyone responded immediately to the primary colors, and I wanted to find out why that set of color was. I mean, in my own mind, I've got an idea, but what was it about that color? Was it just visceral?
I don't know. We talked about going with a green color palette.
Yep.
Because of growth and dynamism.
Yes. Yeah. I brought in one that was like you have it. You have
I
it.
do. I have it in my house. And we talked about a more brown color palette.
Yes.
And we did. All of us looked at the one that is up there on the wall, or at least an earlier draft here.
Yeah.
And it's the reds, which not only resonate with what else is in that lobby, but it's also the energy behind it that I think spoke to each one of us, to make us not just think about it, because psychology is not solely cognitive.
Right.
The emotion, the relational, those pieces that make us who we are and engaging with others.
And isn't that kind of sum and substance of the nature of the commission itself? It's kind of like, coming and having a conversation, coming back with sketches. You and I meeting at Honeycomb, I remember one time, and I still had them all on 3 separate watercolor blocks, and we kind of like brought them out there, and and we're looking at there and starting to talk about the way that they were acting and reacting. So,
and I feel like there is a synergy between the way in which you engage with art and life and the way we think about psychology.
mm-hmm.
That there's a dynamism there in the relational piece, so that we each bring what we have, and then by the engagement we're all transformed.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was something that was really important to me in knowing about your work and wanting it to be represented.
Well, it's, one of the things that sometimes people think about abstraction, especially working with particular kinds of geometric forms, is they say, well, it's kind of cold and analytic. And one of the things that I remember my dear friend Tanya Butler saying to me is that, isn't the analytics, something else, another means by which God has given us to act and interact, with the world and with one another, that we need not think of it in those kinds of terms. But
And when I look at that piece, I don't think analytics, although I know it's there for you. It's just different levels
yes.
of the
Yeah.
creation process.
Yeah. What we were talking about earlier about in terms of making decisions, I had no idea how that piece was going to turn out, if it was going to turn out in you know, again, you work from a sketch, but ultimately you let that go, and it has to be its own its own thing, its own piece, you know, and you know, in that way, it's kind of maybe a difference between a rough draft and a final, but the but I found in working on the pieces, there was a whole set of new things I was learning that I was even able to bring into other things that I was doing, and that was a nice surprise, you know, that there was a dialogue now going on between the commissioned piece and things I was working on independently from them.
And I think psychology is a lot like that too. That if you had created the piece that was in our minds, I mean, they would have been different for one thing, but also it would not be what came out at the end here.
Yeah.
That by the process of working together, it was transformative.
Have you heard responses, you know, on the part of other colleagues or of students in the hallway, or have you heard people's response to the piece? I'd be interested to know.
I will know more soon because it will be up longer.
That's right.
But people are noticing it. Maybe some of you.
I'm not in interaction
Haven't
with
been
students on the
over.
hallway, so
Yes.
I think that's part of it. We're limited because we're not gathering in the hallways.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
if people notice it, it's very personal noticing rather than noticing in community.
Well, I got a text image from our colleague in biology, Craig Story,
Nice.
and he sent me a text image going, good to see your work up over here, you know. So it was this little bit of
Oh, that's
little bit of
great.
So
encouragement.
encouraging.
So somebody's seeing it,
That's
you
nice.
know.
Wonderful.
So I walked by it one day with someone who said, "Oh, this is new," and I said, "Yeah, it's only been there like a couple of days," and they said, "I like the energy."
Yes.
There's success. I'll count that as
Yes.
success.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I thought this was funny, and someone else walked up and said, "I get what's going on either side," and I thought, "Well, you're doing better than I am." Because more, I feel more. It's the feelings that it pulls from me,
Yes.
rather than really knowing.
Yeah.
And then he said, "But what's happening here in the middle?" And I said, "That's the mystery."
That's right.
That is
Great
exactly the
answer.
point. Yeah.
That's
That's
perfect.
the point.
That is
That's
perfect.
the open space for creativity and
Yeah.
transformation
Yeah.
and integrity and
Transformation.
And
It-
for people looking at it to put themselves into the
Right.
painting
Yeah.
in some sense they don't even understand.
One of the things you know that you know is I listen to music all the time. I play music. All those horizontal bands are comes right out of a musical staff. I mean that's that's kind of a place where things alternate. So there's like different there's different kinds of talk about dynamism as being volume in music, and so there's that as things raise and lower inside the picture, they kind of operate musically. The other thing is that there is no music unless there's absence. There's pause, there's rests. So it's like, well, why would I use a half note here instead of using a 16th note, an 8th note? So this idea of pause and rest is something, but also that rest, that pause is still inherently a part of and maybe even more important than that which is seen, the thing that's unseen. I'm getting all zen on you.
Well, you are, and you're all dynamic. And I was thinking static, because I was thinking of pictures with the white around them, and that white changes the interaction that one has with a piece.
Yes.
But I love, you took it a step further, and I love it. So, Z, would you talk a little bit about the title
Yes.
of the piece?
So the title of the piece is called Source, and one of the things that we had talked about is what is that. We were just talking about the mystery of that white space. What orients that which is going on to the left and to the right. What is that middle space, and which is the space of light for me. And so whether we want to think about that as being a creative force, if we want to think about that as being you know, that which enables all of us, that which gives life, you know, i.e. God to all things, you know, in that case. So that was one of the things that I was thinking of, that there is a source in which all things move from and all things draw back to. So that, which goes back to that idea of the breathing, you know, that's going on. And again, this, you know, those things that are understood, those points of clarity, those things that we don't understand, those places of faith, I suppose, you know, in that. So yeah, so that's the very notion of that piece, you know, that, which is why that middle space is just so all important, you know, and the temptation not to simply fill things in there, you know, which is my tendency.
And God is the source.
There you go.
And the source not just of who we are, but who God brings into encounter with us.
Absolutely.
It just, there's so much there that
Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
I am thrilled.